What would you do if your neighborhood's HOA slapped you with $250,000 in fines on your own property? Most people would break, but this man didn't. Instead, he uncovered a shocking secret. The entire community, every single house, every road, even the park, was built on land that he owned. And when the truth came out, the bullies became the ones begging for mercy. The unbelievable start. Imagine this for a second. You work your whole life, saving every dollar you can, and finally, you buy a piece of land you can call your own. It's your dream, your escape from noise, stress, and people telling you what to do. You picture peace, freedom, and a place where you make the rules. But then out of nowhere, you open your mailbox one day and find a letter demanding thousands of dollars in fines. Not from the government, not from the bank, but from your neighborhood's Homeowners Association, the infamous HOA. That's exactly what happened to Marcus. He wasn't a celebrity, he wasn't a billionaire. He was just a hardworking man who had poured years of effort into securing a few acres of land just outside a newly developed neighborhood. To him, this wasn't just dirt and grass, it was proof of his perseverance. But the moment Marcus settled in, the problems began. The Homeowners Association, or HOA, quickly turned their eyes on him. Now, for anyone unfamiliar, an HOA is supposed to maintain standards in a community. Things like keeping the streets clean, ensuring houses look uniform, and protecting property values. At least that's the nice version. In reality, many HOAs are notorious for being power-hungry, petty, and downright ruthless. And in Marcus's case, they decided to go after him with everything they had. It started small. A letter here, a warning there. One day they claimed his grass was too high and didn't meet community standards. Another time they insisted his fence wasn't painted the approved shade of beige. Imagine that, your own fence on your own land, and a group of strangers trying to tell you it wasn't the right color. But it didn't stop there. They fined him for parking his truck in his own driveway. Yes, you heard that right. A man parks his vehicle where he lives and somehow it becomes a violation. The HOA kept stacking more and more charges, piling one ridiculous rule on top of another until the total amount reached something jaw-dropping. $250,000. $250,000. To Marcus, it felt surreal. He wasn't some millionaire who could shrug it off. He was just trying to live his life. And suddenly these people who didn't buy his land, people who didn't pay his bills, people who didn't help him earn a single penny, were now demanding more money than he could possibly imagine. At first, Marcus tried to reason with them. He explained that his property wasn't even part of their subdivision in the way they claimed. But the HOA didn't care. They pushed harder, sending threatening letters, calling him to hearings and warning that if he didn't pay, they would put a lien on his land. A lien, for those who don't know, is basically a legal lock on your property. It can prevent you from selling, refinancing, or even fully owning it until you pay up. The HOA wanted to choke Marcus financially until he either gave in or lost everything. Now here's where it gets worse. Marcus wasn't just facing fines. He was also facing whispers. The neighborhood wasn't exactly welcoming to him in the first place. He was one of the very few black men in that area, and it didn't go unnoticed. Some residents gave him side eyes, muttered under their breath, or crossed the street when he walked by. Whether spoken out loud or left unsaid, Marcus felt the weight of being treated like he didn't belong, and the HOA seemed to feed off that. Instead of protecting a homeowner, they turned him into a target. They acted as if Marcus was a problem that needed to be handled. But here's the thing, Marcus wasn't weak. He wasn't someone who would fold under pressure. Every time they hit him with another letter, another threat, another absurd demand, he grew more determined. Something deep inside him whispered, they don't know who they're messing with. You see, the HOA thought Marcus was just another regular homeowner they could bully, someone without money, connections, or power, someone who would eventually wave the white flag. But Marcus had something up his sleeve that they never saw coming. Something that would flip the balance of power completely upside down. And that's where the story takes a shocking turn. Because while the HOA was busy nitpicking about grass height and fence paint, they completely missed the biggest truth of all. Marcus wasn't just another homeowner in their little community. He was holding onto a secret that would leave them speechless. The HOA's attack. The letters didn't stop. At first, Marcus thought it might just be a mistake. Maybe the HOA had accidentally sent a warning to the wrong address. But within a week, another envelope arrived, and then another. Each time the message was the same. You are in violation of HOA rules. You must pay a fine. The fines weren't small either. They started at a couple $100, then jumped to a few thousand. Within a month, Marcus was looking at tens of thousands of dollars in penalties. The HOA wasn't playing games. They sent him official notices, stamped and sealed like they came straight from a courtroom. They told him he was required to attend compliance hearings. And if he didn't, they threatened to place liens on his land. Basically a legal trap that would lock up his property until he paid every last cent. For Marcus, it felt like a full-blown attack. And it wasn't just the HOA. The neighborhood began to change too. People who once waved when he drove by suddenly looked away. Some whispered when he walked down the street. He could feel the stares, the judgment. Marcus was one of the only black men in the area. And whether people admitted it or not, that played a role. The HOA acted like he didn't belong. They treated him like an outsider who had somehow slipped through the cracks of their perfect community. Instead of welcoming him, they targeted him, almost like they wanted to send a message. You don't fit in here. The things they fined him for were absurd. His grass too long, his truck parked incorrectly, his fence the wrong shade of paint. Every week it was something new, and each time the fine increased. Marcus tried reasoning with them. He wrote letters back, explaining that his land wasn't technically even part of their subdivision. He wasn't bound by their rules the way other homeowners were, but his words didn't matter. The HOA simply ignored his responses and doubled down. They wanted money, and they wanted control. Soon the total balance owed was staggering. $250,000, $250,000. For most people, that would have been the breaking point. Imagine checking your mail every week and finding yet another letter telling you that you owe money you don't have. Imagine walking outside your house and feeling like every neighbor was watching you, judging you, whispering about you. The stress alone would have crushed almost anyone. But Marcus wasn't most people. Instead of giving in, he started watching the HOA closely. He noticed how quick they were to attack, but how sloppy they were in their details. They were so focused on breaking him that they never stopped to ask the bigger question, did they even have the right? Marcus spent sleepless nights going through his paperwork. He dug up every receipt, every deed, every document he had from the day he purchased his land. While most people would have simply panicked, Marcus went into detective mode. But before we get to what he found, let's pause here. Think about what the HOA was really doing. They weren't just enforcing community rules. They were using intimidation, legal threats, financial pressure, and social isolation to try to push a man off his own property. They wanted him broken, silent, and gone. The sad truth is, this isn't rare. Across the country, HOAs have gained a reputation for abusing their power. They fine people for kids' toys left outside, for flowers planted in the wrong color, even for having a mailbox that doesn't perfectly match the neighbors. And when homeowners fight back, the HOA usually has the money and lawyers to drag them into endless battles. Marcus knew this. He had heard stories of other people losing their homes because of ridiculous HOA demands, but he refused to be another victim. Every letter they sent made him more determined. Every fine they added gave him more reason to fight. And while the HOA thought they were crushing him, Marcus was quietly building his case, preparing for the day when the tables would finally turn. Because here's the truth the HOA didn't know. Marcus wasn't just some stubborn homeowner. He wasn't just a man standing alone against a powerful board. He had something far more valuable, something no amount of fines or threats could take away. And soon, the HOA would discover that they weren't the ones in control. The game-changing discovery. Most people, when buried under $250,000 in fines, would have cracked. They would have either packed their bags and left, or given in and tried to pay whatever they could. That's exactly what the HOA expected Marcus to do. But Marcus wasn't built that way. Instead of panicking, he went back to the beginning, back to the day he first bought his land. He pulled out the old deed, the purchase papers, and every dusty folder he had kept stored in a box in his closet. If the HOA wanted a fight, Marcus was going to arm himself with the most powerful weapon of all, the truth. Night after night, Marcus sat at his kitchen table, papers spread out in front of him. He highlighted, circled and reread every single line. He even made trips to the county courthouse, where clerks gave him access to land records that most people never even bother to look at. He asked questions. He searched through maps. He traced back every transaction that had ever been made involving his property. And then he found it. At first, it looked like just another line in the paperwork, something easy to overlook, but when Marcus read it carefully, his jaw dropped. Years ago, when he had purchased his land, he hadn't just bought his plot. No, what Marcus had unknowingly acquired was the entire stretch of land beneath the neighborhood's development. Let that sink in for a second. The HOA's houses, built on top of it. The community park, sitting right on his property. Even the road leading into the subdivision, technically crossing land he owned. Marcus blinked, almost in disbelief. Could it be real? Could this paperwork actually mean what it looked like it meant? To make sure, he double-checked, triple-checked, and even asked a legal aid at the courthouse to confirm. And the answer was shocking, yes. The developers who had built the neighborhood years earlier had made a critical mistake. They had purchased the rights to build homes, but they had overlooked one tiny but massive detail. Marcus had never sold them the mineral rights and easements to the land. In simple terms, that meant while they had the houses, Marcus still legally owned the ground underneath all of it. This wasn't just about his plot anymore. This was about all of it. Think about the irony. Here was the HOA piling up fines on Marcus, treating him like an outsider, even threatening to strip him of his property, when in reality, they were the ones trespassing on land that belonged to him. They had been living, driving, and playing in a community that was, on paper, still his. Marcus leaned back in his chair and laughed to himself. All those letters, all that intimidation, all those threats, and none of it mattered. Because when it came down to it, the HOA wasn't in control, he was. This wasn't just a small oversight. This was a game-changing discovery, a legal loophole that turned the entire balance of power upside down. Marcus realized that technically, he could charge the HOA fees for using his land. He could block access to roads, restrict utilities, or even take legal action to force them into compliance. The possibilities were endless. But Marcus wasn't reckless. He wasn't about to swing this discovery around like a weapon. No, he knew he had to be smart, careful, and precise. The HOA had played their game by the book, using paperwork and threats. Now Marcus would beat them with the very same thing. Only this time, the paperwork was on his side. Imagine the confidence he felt walking back into his house after confirming the records. The same man who had been buried under $250,000 in fines, who had been laughed at, whispered about, and treated like he didn't belong, now held the one card that could end the HOA's little power trip forever. For weeks they had made Marcus feel small. But now the roles were about to reverse. The HOA thought they were the kings of the neighborhood, the untouchable rulers. But Marcus had discovered something bigger than all their threats combined. The truth that the ground beneath their feet wasn't theirs at all. And in that moment, Marcus realized he wasn't just fighting to protect his home. He was about to teach the entire neighborhood a lesson they would never forget. Because while they were busy finding him for grass, fences, and trucks, they had no idea that the man they were bullying was, quite literally, the owner of it all, the turn of power. Marcus knew this was no longer about fines, fences, or grass. This was about earning respect when something the HOA had tried to strip from him since the day he moved in. And now, with the deed in his hand and the truth on his side, he was ready to turn the tables. The next time a threatening letter showed up in his mailbox, Marcus didn't crumple it up or toss it aside. Instead, he prepared a response that would silence the HOA once and for all. He placed a copy of his land deed in an envelope, neatly highlighted with the exact section proving ownership of the land beneath the subdivision. Along with it, he included a short, polite, but firm notice. The letter was simple. Since your community is occupying land I legally own, all future use of this land requires compensation. Effective immediately, the HOA will be responsible for paying easement and land use fees. That was it. No yelling, no threats, no insults, just cold hard facts. When Marcus dropped that letter in the mailbox, he smiled. For the first time in months, he felt in control. And then silence. The HOA, which had bombarded him with letter after letter for weeks, suddenly went quiet. No new fines, no threats, no demands. It was as if the entire board had been struck speechless. Behind closed doors, however, chaos broke out. Within days, the HOA scrambled to call the emergency meetings. Board members who once strutted around the neighborhood, like kings and queens, were now panicking. Their attorney was brought in, papers spread across tables, voices raised late into the night. They searched for loopholes, desperate to prove Marcus wrong. But no matter how they twisted the paperwork, the facts didn't change. The documents were ironclad. Marcus wasn't bluffing. He was the legal owner of the ground beneath their homes, their parks, even their streets. The HOA had gone from aggressive bullies to nervous negotiators. Word spread quickly through the neighborhood. Residents who once whispered about Marcus, who looked at him like he didn't belong, suddenly wanted to shake his hand. Some even knocked on his door, offering apologies. The man they thought they could push around was now the one holding the cards. For Marcus, it was a surreal shift. Just weeks earlier, he was treated like an outsider, someone the HOA wanted gone. Now those same people were looking at him with respect, even admiration. But Marcus didn't gloat. He didn't shout, "I told you so." He stayed calm, collected, and professional. That's what made the victory even sweeter. He wasn't just winning the battle, he was winning it with dignity. When the HOA's lawyer finally reached out, the tone had completely changed. No more demands. No more fines. Instead, they wanted to discuss terms. Marcus met them face to face, walking into the boardroom with the confidence of a man who knew he held all the power. The same people who had once lectured him about grass height and fence, paint now sat across the table, shuffling papers nervously. Their lawyer tried to argue technicalities, but Marcus had done his homework. Every line, every clause, every map. He knew it better than they did. And when he slid the highlighted deed across the table, the room fell silent. There was no way out. The HOA had no choice but to acknowledge the truth. Marcus owned the foundation of their entire subdivision, and if they wanted to continue living there without legal chaos, they would have to comply with his terms. It was a moment Marcus would never forget. The same people who tried to strip him of his home were now at his mercy. The man they underestimated, the man they tried to crush with $250,000 in bogus fines, had flipped the script completely. Neighbors who had once avoided eye contact now stopped him on the street to shake his hand. Some even thanked him for standing up to the HOA, admitting they too had been victims of unfair rules but were too afraid to speak out. Marcus had gone from being treated like a problem to being seen as a hero, and all it took was the truth and the courage to stand his ground. The HOA that once tried to bury him in debt now had to negotiate on his terms. They could no longer bully him, because Marcus held the ultimate trump card: ownership, the sweetest revenge. In the end, Marcus didn't just win. He flipped the entire situation upside down. The HOA that once sent him weekly threats, slapped him with $250,000 in bogus fines, and tried to make him feel powerless was now the one writing checks to him. Instead of draining his bank account, they had no choice but to pay Marcus a yearly fee for the use of the very land their community was built on. It was poetic justice. The same people who had tried to push him out were now dependent on him. Just to keep their neighborhood functioning, Marcus didn't waste the opportunity. He could have rubbed it in their faces, demanded outrageous sums, or tried to make life miserable for them the way they had done to him. But that wasn't who he was. Marcus believed in justice, not revenge. So he negotiated fairly. The fees were enough to remind the HOA of his authority, but not so outrageous that they couldn't manage. He wanted respect, not destruction. With that steady income, Marcus reinvested back into his own life. He improved his property, building a home that stood as a symbol of resilience. He added gardens, upgraded his house, and finally created the peaceful retreat he had dreamed of when he first bought the land. But he didn't stop there. Marcus had seen firsthand how dangerous HOAs could be when they abused their power. He knew there were countless other families out there, feeling trapped, silenced, and bullied by boards just like his. So he decided to use part of his earnings to start a community fund, a program that helped homeowners fight back when their HOAs crossed the line. Word spread quickly. Marcus became more than just the man who owned the ground. Under an entire neighborhood, he became a local legend. People admired not just the fact that he had beaten the HOA, but how he had done it. He never raised his voice. He never slammed doors or shouted in anger. He didn't resort to intimidation, threats, or chaos. He simply let the truth and his ownership rights speak louder than anything else. And that was the sweetest revenge of all. The HOA once feared now treaded lightly around him. Board members who had once written nasty letters were suddenly polite, respectful, almost cautious in every word they said. Neighbors who had whispered behind his back now nodded warmly when they passed him on the street. Some even apologized, admitting they had misjudged him. Marcus had transformed from the outsider into the man who held their community together. The story spread beyond the neighborhood, too. Local news outlets picked it up. Social media buzzed about the man who owned his HOA's land. People everywhere celebrated the story of someone standing up against an unfair system and winning in a way nobody expected. But for Marcus, the victory wasn't about fame. It wasn't about headlines. It was about peace of mind. He no longer woke up dreading the sound of the mailbox. He no longer felt like a stranger in his own home. He had reclaimed his dignity, his respect, and his freedom. And all of it happened because he refused to back down. His story became a reminder for anyone who has ever been pushed around, underestimated, or made to feel powerless. Sometimes the strongest weapon isn't anger, or fighting harder, or matching your enemy's cruelty. Sometimes the greatest strength comes from knowledge, patience, and the simple courage to stand firm on the truth. Marcus didn't just defend his home. He proved that the ground he stood on literally belonged to him. And now, every time he looks out over his land, he smiles, because the same neighborhood that once tried to bury him in fines now pays him rent to exist. That's not just victory, that's poetic justice. So the next time someone tries to bully you, pressure you, or make you feel small, remember Marcus's story. Remember that sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't shouting, or fighting, or getting even. It's standing tall, knowing your worth, and letting the truth do the talking. Because in the end, respect isn't given, it's earned. And Marcus earned it in the most unforgettable way possible. And that's how one man turned a $250,000 nightmare into the sweetest victory of his life. If you enjoyed this story and want more unbelievable tales like this, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell so you never miss the next one.